Dr. Kim Hana rubbed her tired eyes and reached for her third cup of coffee that morning. The deep space communication array had been her second home for the past month, ever since the strange signals started coming from Proxima Centauri. Most of her colleagues thought she was wasting time, but something deep inside told her this was important. The monitoring room was quiet except for the steady hum of computers and the occasional beep from incoming data. Outside the windows, Seoul's skyline stretched into the distance, but Hana's attention was completely focused on the green waves dancing across her screen. "You're here early again," said Park Minho as he walked in with 2 steaming cups. "Don't tell me you slept here." Hana accepted the coffee gratefully. "I couldn't sleep anyway. This signal has been getting weaker every day, but look at this pattern." She pointed to a series of repeating waves on her monitor. "It's not natural interference. There's something organized about it." Minho leaned closer, his expression changing from concern to curiosity. "You really think it's artificial?" "I'm sure of it, but it's unlike anything we've ever received before. The mathematical structure is completely foreign, yet somehow it feels urgent, almost desperate." For weeks, Hana had been running the signal through every translation program and analysis tool available. She tried comparing it to known radio patterns, natural phenomena, and even theoretical alien communication models that scientists had developed over the years. Nothing matched. The breakthrough came during a particularly cold morning in Seoul. Hana had arrived at the facility before dawn, determined to make one last attempt before the signal faded completely. She decided to approach it differently, focusing not on the technical aspects but on the emotional rhythm beneath the data. As she adjusted the filters and frequency settings, something clicked. The chaotic noise began to separate into distinct patterns. What had seemed like random static now revealed itself as structured communication. Her heart raced as she realized she was looking at the first confirmed alien message in human history. The translation process took 3 more days of careful work. Hana barely left her station, surviving on coffee and determination. Slowly, painfully, the alien words began to make sense. The being who sent the message had used mathematical concepts and emotional markers that transcended species barriers. When the first complete sentence appeared on her screen, Hana's hands began to shake. "My name is Kethvar, of the Zelani people," the Gyoam message continued to unfold, revealing a story that chilled her to the bone. Kethvar spoke of his dying world, conquered by something called the Dominion hegemony. He described how his people had fought bravely, but were overwhelmed by an enemy that controlled vast regions of space. "We thought we were alone in the universe," the message explained. "By the time we learned otherwise, it was too late. The Dominion came with ships that blocked out our sun and weapons that turned our cities to glass." But Kethvar's message wasn't just a record of defeat. As his strength faded, he had managed to steal crucial information from his captors. The transmission included detailed technical data about Dominion ships, their supply routes, and most importantly, a critical flaw in their defensive systems. "They believe their shields are perfect," Kethvar had written. "But I discovered their frequency rotation has a gap that lasts exactly 2.7 seconds every cycle. A skilled enemy could exploit this weakness." The dying alien had also included star charts showing Dominion patrol routes and the locations of their supply bases. It was intelligence that could change the balance of power in the galaxy, if anyone was brave enough to use it. As Hana read the final portion of the message, tears began to flow down her cheeks. Kethvar's last words were a plea that transcended species and distance. "If anyone receives this message, please remember my people. We were explorers and artists, scientists and dreamers. The Dominion reduced us to numbers in their records, but we were more than that. We had names, we had families, we had hope." The message ended with coordinates and technical specifications that Kethvar hoped might help future civilizations avoid his people's fate. His final transmission was growing weaker with each word, as if he was using the last of his strength to complete it. "Perhaps you will be stronger than we were. Perhaps you will succeed where we failed. If so, please don't let our sacrifice be meaningless. The galaxy needs someone to stand against the darkness." Hana sat in stunned silence as the full impact of the message hit her. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they weren't. But they had also learned that the galaxy was a far more dangerous place than anyone had imagined. She looked around the quiet monitoring room, then at the busy city beyond the windows. Millions of people going about, their daily lives, completely unaware that everything had just changed. An alien species had reached across the void to warn them of a threat beyond their worst nightmares. Kethvar's message was both a gift and a burden. The technical information he provided could help humanity defend itself, but it also meant they now carried the responsibility of his people's memory and the knowledge of a galactic empire that would eventually find Earth. As Hana reached for her phone to call the facility director, she whispered a promise to the empty room. "We won't forget you, Kethvar, and we won't let your people's sacrifice be meaningless." The age of human isolation was over. The real test was just beginning. Commander Lee Jaiwan gripped the rail of his ship's bridge as he watched the orange glow fade from the planet below. 5 years ago, he had been teaching military history at Seoul National University. Now he commanded humanity's most advanced warship, hidden in the darkness between stars, watching an entire civilization die. The Soul's Pride was unlike any vessel Earth had ever built before. Its hull was covered in a special coating that bent, light around it, making it nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The engines ran silent, using technology that human scientists had developed by studying Kethvar's stolen data. Everything about the ship was designed for one purpose: to spy on the Ain, Dominion Empire without being detected. "Sir, the planet's surface temperature is still rising," reported Lieutenant Cho Yunji from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jiwon could see her hands shaking slightly as she read the numbers. Whatever weapons they used, they're still burning everything. Jiwon had seen the attack begin 3 hours earlier. The Dominion fleet had arrived without warning, surrounding the peaceful world of Kepler 442b like wolves circling prey. The local inhabitants had tried to surrender, broadcasting messages of peace in dozens of languages. The Dominion's response had been swift and merciless. First came the harvester ships, massive vessels that descended to the planet's surface and began stripping away natural resources. Mountains disappeared into their cargo holds. Oceans were drained and processed into fuel. The local population was rounded up and loaded onto transport ships like cattle. But then something had gone wrong. The aliens on Kepler 442b had tried to fight back, using primitive weapons against the Dominion soldiers. It was a hopeless battle, but they fought anyway, defending their homes and families with desperate courage. The Dominion's punishment had been total. Ships in orbit had opened fire with weapons that turned the planet's surface into molten glass. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were erased in minutes. Forests, rivers, and mountains all became part of a burning wasteland that could be seen from space. "Navigator Park Jinwoo, how long until we're out of sensor range?" Jiwon asked. "Another 10 minutes, sir. But we're picking up movement from the Dominion fleet. 3 patrol ships are heading in this direction, using Formation Pattern 7. Jiwon nodded grimly. Formation Pattern 7 was exactly what Kethvar's intelligence data had predicted. The dying aliens' information had been perfect in every detail, which made the sight of Kepler 442b even more terrifying. If the Dominion could do this to an entire world, what would happen when they found Earth? "Take us out of here slowly," he ordered. "No sudden movements. We can't let them know. We were watching." The Soul's Pride began to move away from the dying planet, its engines barely whispering in the vacuum of space. Behind them, the Dominion fleet continued its work, processing the remains of a civilization that had existed for millennia. Back on Earth, President Kim Dae-ho sat in a hidden conference room deep beneath the Blue House. The room officially didn't exist, and neither did the people gathered around the table. For 5 years, world leaders had been secretly preparing for the threat that Kethvar had warned them about. "The reconnaissance mission confirms everything," Defense Minister Song Yuna was saying as she displayed images from the Soul's Pride. "The Dominion operates exactly as described in the aliens' message. They arrive, harvest everything of value, enslave the population, and destroy anyone who resists." Around the table, Representatives from major nations studied the horrifying images. The burning planet looked like something from humanity's worst nightmares, but it was real, and it was happening right now in their galaxy. "How many worlds have they taken?" asked the Chinese representative. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected similar attacks on at least 40 planets in the past 2 years, Song replied. "And those are just the ones we can observe. The real number is probably much higher." President Kim looked at the faces around the table. These were people who normally spent their time arguing about trade agreements and border disputes. Now they were planning humanity's response to an alien empire that could destroy entire civilizations. "Minister, Song, what's the status of our defensive preparations?" "Phase 1 is complete, sir. We have stealth ships like the Soul's Pride operating in 12 different systems, gathering intelligence and mapping Dominion movements. Phase 2 begins next month." Song activated a holographic display showing the outer edges of human space. Red dots marked Dominion patrol routes, while blue lines showed planned attack vectors. "We've built weapons specifically designed to exploit the shield frequency gap that Kethvar discovered. Our strike teams have been training for 3 years. Using combat simulations based on Dominion tactics, we're as ready as we can be." "And if we're wrong?" asked the European Union representative. "If we attack them and fail?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. They had all seen what happened to civilizations that fought the Dominion and lost. President Kim stood up, his decision made. "Then we do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. We fight anyway." Kethvar trusted us with his people's last hope. He believed that somewhere in the galaxy there was a species strong enough to stand against the darkness. He looked around the table at each representative. "Maybe we'll succeed, maybe we'll fail, but we won't go quietly into the night. The Dominion is about to learn that humanity doesn't surrender." Outside the conference room, the first human strike. Teams were already boarding ships heading toward the outer rim of the galaxy, where they would begin humanity's war against an empire that had never known defeat. The age of hiding was over. The real fight was about to begin. Captain Han Sumin watched the Dominion supply convoy through her ship's view screen, counting the massive cargo vessels as they moved slowly through the Vega sector. Intelligence reports said these ships carried weapons and supplies to 3 different slave worlds. In a few minutes, that cargo would never reach its destination. "Strike Team Alpha, are you in position?" she whispered into her communications device. "Ready, Captain," came the reply from Lieutenant Kim Wonho, whose ship was hidden behind a nearby asteroid. Torpedo tubes loaded with the new phase shift warheads. Suman smiled grimly. The phase shift torpedoes were humanity's secret weapon, designed using the shield frequency data that Kethvar had died to provide. While Dominion shields could stop any normal attack, these special weapons could slip through the gap that occurred every 2.7 seconds in their defensive cycle. "Strike Team Beta, report," she called. "In position and ready," responded Sergeant Yoon Tae-hyuk from the opposite side of the convoy. "The supply ships are exactly where intelligence said they would be." For months, human strike teams had been watching Dominion movements, learning their patterns and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The convoy in front of them represented one of the Empire's major supply routes, carrying enough weapons to keep 3 worlds under control for years. "All teams, fire on my mark," Suman ordered. "Remember, we want complete destruction. No survivors, no witnesses, no evidence of who attacked them." The Dominion ships continued their slow journey, completely unaware that death was approaching from 3 different directions. Their shields were up. Their sensors were active. But they had never encountered weapons like the ones humanity had developed. "Mark." The phase shift torpedoes streaked through space, invisible to Dominion sensors until it was too late. The first ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, followed quickly by the second and third. Within 30 seconds, the entire convoy was nothing but debris floating in the darkness. "All targets destroyed," Tae-hyuk reported, his voice filled with satisfaction. "No survivors detected." "Excellent work, everyone," Suman said. "Let's get out of here before their patrol ships arrive, and remember to leave our calling card." As the human ships prepared to leave, They released a small probe that would broadcast a simple message on all Dominion frequencies. The galaxy remembers Kethvar. Across the galaxy, similar attacks were happening every day. Human strike teams, moving like ghosts through space, hit supply convoys, destroyed communication stations, and eliminated Dominion outposts with surgical precision. The Empire's commanders were completely baffled by these new enemies who seemed to know their every weakness. On the Zilani homeworld, now a gray and polluted slave colony, the news of the attacks spread through secret underground networks faster than wildfire. In hidden tunnels beneath the ruined cities, small groups of survivors gathered to whisper about the impossible. Elder Morthak was one of the few Zilani old enough to remember life before the Dominion conquest. He had known Kethvar personally, had watched his friend die while transmitting his final message into space. Now, 50 years later, something incredible was happening. The attacks on the Outer Rim, he told a gathering of young resistance fighters, his ancient voice shaking with emotion. The tactics being used, the technology, it matches the old prophecies that Kethvar spoke of before he died. The younger Zilani looked at him with confusion. They had been born into slavery and knew nothing of prophecies or hope. What prophecies? Elder? Asked one of them. Kethvar believed that somewhere in the galaxy there was a species that would hear our call for help. He said they would be different from us, stronger, more stubborn. He said they would never give up even when facing impossible odds. The meeting was interrupted by a coded message from the surface. A group of unknown aliens wanted to make contact with the Zilani resistance. They claimed to be friends and they had weapons to share. Commander Kim Hyun-soo waited nervously in the abandoned factory where the meeting was supposed to take place. This was humanity's first direct contact with one of the enslaved species, and everything depended on making a good first impression. When the Zilani rebels arrived, Hyun-soo was struck by how much they looked like the descriptions in Kethvar's message. They were tall and thin, with large eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. But 50 years of slavery had broken their spirits. They moved like beaten animals, constantly looking over their shoulders. "We are friends," Hyun-soo said through his translation device. "We received a message from one of your people named Kethvar. We came to help." The effect of that name on the Zilani was immediate. They fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. Elder Morthak stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper. You heard him? After all these years, someone actually heard our brother's call?" "We heard him," Hyun-soo confirmed, "and we came as fast as we could. Your people fought bravely, but you fought alone. Now you have allies." Over the following weeks, the humans shared their weapons, their tactics, and most importantly, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat. They taught the Zilani how to build bombs from common materials, how to coordinate attacks across multiple locations, and how to strike at the Dominion's weak points. The rebellion spread like fire through dry grass. Within months, 17 different star systems were in open revolt. Species that had been crushed under Dominion rule for generations suddenly found themselves equipped with hope and the tools to fight back. The Empire's commanders couldn't understand what was happening. Their slaves were supposed to be broken, defeated, and hopeless. Instead, they were fighting with new weapons, new tactics, and a determination that seemed to come from nowhere. But Elder Morthak understood. As he watched a Dominion garrison burn in the distance, he whispered a prayer of thanks to his old friend. Kethvar's dying message had become the spark that would ignite the largest uprising in galactic history. Archon Vextar stood in the command center of his flagship, staring at the holographic map that showed his crumbling empire. Red warning lights blinked across dozens of star systems where his supply convoys had been destroyed. For the first time in his 300 years of service, the Dominion was losing control. His armored fist crashed into the tactical display, causing sparks to fly from the damaged electronics. Around him, his officers flinched but said nothing. They had learned long ago that speaking during one of the Archon's rages was a quick way to die. 17 supply convoys destroyed in the past month, he growled, his voice echoing through his battle helmet. 43 outposts eliminated, and we still don't know who these cowards are. General Krixt, his chief military advisor, stepped forward carefully. "My lord, our investigation teams have found something. The attack pattern suggests the enemy comes from a single star system in the outer rim." Vextar turned toward him, his glowing red eyes visible through his helmet's visor. "Show me." The tactical display reformed, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. A bright yellow line traced backwards from each attack site, all converging on a small, unremarkable solar system near the edge of known space. "Sol system," Krixt reported. "Intelligence suggests it contains a young species that has recently developed space travel. They call themselves humans." "Humans," Vextar repeated the word like a curse. "How many worlds do they control?" "Only one, my lord, but they have established several mining colonies and research stations throughout their system." Vextar smiled beneath his helmet. This would be easier than he thought. A single world populated by primitives who had gotten lucky with a few surprise attacks. The Dominion had crushed 1,000 such species over the centuries. "Assemble the third battle fleet," he commanded. "I want every ship, every weapon, every soldier we can spare. We will make an example of these humans that will be remembered for 1,000 years." Within days, the largest Dominion fleet in recent history was moving toward Sol system. 300 warships, each capable of destroying a planet, accompanied by support vessels and troop transports carrying enough soldiers to occupy a dozen worlds. But the humans were ready for them. Admiral Oh Seung-hoon stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, the King Sejong, watching the approaching enemy fleet through long-range sensors. The numbers were terrifying. Humanity's entire space navy consisted of only 50 ships, most of them converted civilian vessels with hastily installed weapons. "Sir, we're receiving an emergency transmission from New Busan Colony," reported his communications officer. The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of Colony Commander Park Soo-jin. Behind her, explosions lit up the sky as Dominion ships bombarded the settlement from orbit. "They came without warning," she gasped, her voice breaking up due to interference. "Hundreds of ships. We're evacuating everyone we can, but—" The transmission cut off as another explosion rocked the colony. Similar reports came in from across the solar system. The mining stations around Jupiter went silent one by one. The research facility on Mars sent a final desperate message before disappearing in a ball of fire. The Dominion was systematically destroying every human outpost they could find. "They're trying to isolate Earth," Admiral O realized. "Cut off our supply lines and support bases before moving in for the final attack." In the Emergency War Council, deep beneath Seoul, President Park Jin-hee listened to the reports with growing despair. Earth's defenses were strong, but not strong enough to stop 300 enemy warships. Dr. Kim Hana, the woman who had first decoded Kethvar's message, now served as the government's chief advisor on alien affairs. She studied the tactical displays with the same intensity she had once used to translate alien languages. "This is exactly what Kethvar warned us about," she said quietly. "The Dominion's response to any serious threat is overwhelming force. They don't negotiate. They don't show mercy. They simply destroy everything. How long until they reach Earth?" The president asked. 18 hours, maybe less," Admiral O replied through the communication link. "We'll do our best, but ma'am, we're outnumbered 6-1. As Earth's defense fleets move to intercept the approaching armada, something unexpected happened. Communications Officer Lee Minji burst into the war room, her face flushed with excitement. "Ma'am, you need to hear this," she said, activating the main communication array. "We're receiving signals from all across the galaxy." The room filled, with voices speaking in dozens of different alien languages. Slowly, translation programs began converting the messages into Korean. "This is the Zelani resistance. We stand ready to strike. Altarian rebels requesting target coordinates. The Vegan Liberation Front awaits your orders. 1 by 1, 47. Different star systems reported that they were ready to launch coordinated attacks against Dominion targets. The Empire's focus on destroying humanity had left their other territories vulnerable, and the enslaved species were ready to take advantage. President. Park looked around the room at her advisors. then at the tactical displays showing the approaching enemy fleet. The decision she made in the next few minutes would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of freedom throughout the galaxy. "Send them everything," she said firmly. "All our intelligence, all our tactical data, every weakness we've discovered. If we're going down, we're taking the Empire with us." Dr. Hana nodded approvingly. Kethvar would be proud. His sacrifice is about to change the galaxy forever. Across the cosmos, the final gambit was about to begin. The Dominion Empire had controlled the galaxy for centuries, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity, a species that refused to surrender even when facing impossible odds, and inspired others to do the same. The space around Dominion Prime looked like a graveyard of broken ships. For 3 days, the combined fleet of humans and liberated alien species had fought against the Empire's final defenders. Wreckage from both sides drifted through the darkness, silent witnesses to the largest battle in galactic history. Commander Kim Do-yeon wiped blood from a cut above his eye and studied the tactical display on his ship's bridge. His squadron was a mix of human vessels and alien ships from a dozen different species, all united by their hatred of the Dominion Empire. They had come so far together, and now only one target remained. "Sir, the orbital defense platforms are still active," reported his weapons officer, a young Zilani named Torthak. "They're protecting the main shield generators." Do-hyun smiled grimly. The Zilani pilot had lost his entire family to Dominion slave raids, but he had learned to fly human ships with deadly skill. Now he was about to help destroy the empire that had taken everything from him. "All ships, this is Commander Kim," Do-hyun announced over the communication channel. "We're going to use the tactic that Kethvar died to give us. Target the primary shield generators, but wait for my signal. We need to hit them at exactly the right moment." The mixed squadron dove toward the planet's surface, dodging defensive fire from the massive orbital platforms. Dominion weapons lit up space with deadly energy beams, but the human ships were fast and the alien vessels were desperate for revenge. "Remember," Do-hyun called out, "frequency modulation at exactly 847.3 terahertz. Our alien friend knew what he was talking about." As the squadron approached the shield generators, Do-hyun watched his instruments carefully. According to Kethvar's data, the Dominion shields had a weakness that occurred every 2.7 seconds. Timing had to be perfect. "Now!" he shouted. Every ship in the squadron fired at the same instant. The specially designed weapons, built using technology stolen from Dominion databases, slipped through the gap in the enemy shields like they weren't even there. The massive generators that had protected the planet for centuries exploded in brilliant flashes of light. For the first time in 1,000 years, Dominion Prime was defenseless. On the planet's surface, Dr. Kim Hana led a team of human soldiers through the ruins of the capital city. The fighting had been fierce, with Dominion troops defending every building and street corner. But now the resistance was breaking down as news spread that their shields were gone. Hana had come a long way from the quiet scientist who had first decoded Kethvar's message. Now she carried weapons and wore battle armor, leading missions that would have been impossible to imagine 5 years ago. The galaxy had changed her, just as she had helped change the galaxy. "Dr. Kim, we've located the command center," reported Sergeant Lee Junho through her communication device. "But there's heavy resistance. Looks like someone important is making a last stand." Hana made her way through the rubble-filled streets, past burning vehicles and abandoned defensive positions. The Dominion's capital city had once been a symbol of their power and control. Now it looked like a war zone, with smoke rising from collapsed buildings and the sound of distant explosions echoing through the air. The command center was a massive pyramid-shaped building at the heart of the city. Its walls were scarred by weapon fire, and bodies of both human and Dominion soldiers lay scattered around the entrance. Inside, the fighting had been even more intense. Hana found Archon Vextar in what had once been his private office. The alien dictator was wounded, his armor cracked and smoking, but he still held a powerful energy weapon in his hands. Around him lay the bodies of his final defenders, soldiers who had fought to the death rather than surrender. "So you're the one," Vextar snarled, his voice distorted by his damaged helmet. The primitive who thinks she can destroy an empire that has lasted for millennia. I didn't destroy your empire, Hana replied calmly, keeping her weapon trained on him. You destroyed it yourself when you chose to rule through fear instead of justice. Vextar laughed bitterly. Justice? Do you know what the galaxy was like before the Dominion brought order? Chaos, war, suffering on every world. We gave the galaxy peace. You gave them slavery, Hana corrected. There's a difference. The alien, dictator raised his weapon, his finger moving toward the trigger. You think you've won? Without the Dominion, there will be chaos again. Species will fight each other, planets will burn, and you'll wish we had never fallen. Hana thought of Kethvar's final message, of his faith that somewhere in the galaxy there were beings who would choose freedom over safety, hope over despair. Maybe there will be chaos, she admitted, but there will also be freedom, and that's worth fighting for. The shot that ended Vextar's reign echoed through the ruined command center and out across a galaxy that was already celebrating its liberation. 6 months later, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered on a neutral planet to establish the new Galactic Confederation. The meeting hall was filled with beings of every shape and size imaginable, all united by their shared experience of Dominion oppression. In the central plaza outside the building stood a simple memorial made of black stone. Carved into its surface in dozens of different languages were Kethavar's final words. Perhaps you will be stronger than we were. Perhaps you will succeed where we failed. Dr. Hana stood before the assembled delegates, holding a small device that contained the original transmission data from the dying Zalani. He asked us to remember his people, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. Instead, his sacrifice freed us all. Ambassador Choi Jinsang of Earth stepped forward to address the crowd. The Dominion fell because one being believed that somewhere in the darkness someone would listen. Today we promise that no cry for help will go unanswered again. The galaxy had learned what humans had always known, that sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply refusing to give up on each other.